Happiness doesn't come from caring more, it comes from caring less about the right things. Mark Manson's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck challenges the toxic positivity found in most self-help books. Instead of telling readers to think positively or chase happiness, Manson delivers a blunt but liberating message. Life is full of problems, and happiness comes from choosing better ones. The core idea is simple, yet uncomfortable. You can't care about everything, so you must decide what truly deserves your attention. Pain is inevitable, choose it wisely. Manson argues that a good life is not a life without pain, but a life with pain worth enduring. Every path involves struggle. The question is not how to avoid suffering, but which suffering you are willing to accept. You are not special, and that's a good thing. In a culture obsessed with comparison and validation, Manson dismantles the belief that everyone must be extraordinary. You are not special. Rather than being insulting, this idea is freeing. It releases us from unrealistic expectations and allows us to define success on our own terms. Responsibility equals control. One of the book's most powerful lessons is this: you are responsible for everything in your life, even when it's not your fault. Taking responsibility doesn't mean blaming yourself. It means reclaiming control over how you respond to circumstances. Choose better values. Not all values lead to a healthy life. External validation, wealth, and status are unstable foundations for happiness. Manson suggests choosing values that are internally controllable, reality-based, worth failing for. Only these values provide long-term stability. Death gives life meaning. By confronting mortality, we gain clarity. Because time is limited, not everything deserves our attention. The book concludes with a simple truth. A meaningful life is not about avoiding discomfort, but about focusing on what truly matters. Next, let's explore how this philosophy of selective caring can reshape our decisions, priorities, and sense of fulfillment.
All right, let's just dive right in. For a good few years there, it felt like you couldn't go anywhere. A bookstore, an airport, even a friend's house without seeing it. You know the one. That bright, impossible-to-miss orange cover. It became this weird cultural landmark. A book people either swore by or, well, swore at. So today, we're going to unpack the whole phenomenon behind this very, very orange book.
And when I say phenomenon, I am not kidding. The book was a multi-week #1 bestseller in the US. And this number right here, that's the sales from just one country. It wasn't just a book, it was a global thing. But what's really wild is how a book with a title like this managed to pull that off.
And there it is, in all its uncensored glory. You know, in a world of self-help books promising endless happiness and toxic positivity, this one just showed up like a punk rocker at a fancy dinner party. The title itself was a challenge, a filter, and, turns out, millions of people were totally drawn to its unapologetic, in-your-face attitude.
But here's the thing you gotta understand right away. The book isn't about apathy. It's not telling you to care about nothing. It's actually a direct assault on what the author, Mark Manson, calls our culture of toxic positivity. You know, that idea that we have to be happy and upbeat all the time no matter what. Instead, he argues for choosing your battles, for consciously deciding what truly gets to matter to you.
So, what is this subtle art really about then? Let's break down the core philosophy, the big ideas that really hit home for so many people.
This quote from Manson himself really gets to the heart of it. It's a philosophy of subtraction, not addition. The goal isn't to find more things to care about. It's about strategically cutting out all the noise, the trivial stuff, the distractions, the unimportant junk, so you can pour all your energy into the very few things that actually genuinely count.
And this is where the book really flips the script for a lot of people. Manson says we're asking the wrong question. We shouldn't ask ourselves, what do I want to enjoy? A much better question is, what pain am I willing to put up with? He argues that your willingness to struggle for something is a way better indicator of what you truly value than just wanting the reward at the end.
He does the same thing with motivation. You know, we're always told to wait for inspiration to hit us before we do something. Manson says that's completely backwards. He calls it the do something principle. Just take action, any action. That small action is what generates inspiration, and that inspiration is what creates motivation. So action isn't the result of motivation, it's the cause of it.
And he kind of boils all this down into 5 core values. First,
Take total responsibility for your life, even for stuff that isn't your fault. Second, get comfortable with the idea that you might be wrong about, well, pretty much everything. Third, see failure not as the end, but as a mandatory part of getting better. Fourth is getting really good at saying no to things so you can protect your focus. And finally, number 5, think about your own death. Sounds dark, I know, but he says it's the best way to get crystal clear on what's actually important.
Okay, but here's the big twist. For all its massive success, this book is unbelievably polarizing. So now, let's flip the coin and look at the intense backlash and try to understand why so many people absolutely cannot stand it.
And believe me, that is not an exaggeration. If you go online, the discussion around this book is a total battlefield. You've got people on one side calling it life-changing, and on the other, they're calling it simplistic, arrogant, and even genuinely harmful.
The criticism pretty much falls into these buckets. A lot of people just couldn't get past the author's tone, finding it smug and condescending. Others argue that it's nothing new, just ancient philosophy like Stoicism, but, repackaged with a bunch of swear words. Then there are really serious accusations of misogyny, which come from Manson's past as a blogger writing about his life as a playboy. A huge one is the charge of privilege, that it's advice that only works if you already have a safety net. And finally, some people just think the whole edgy thing is a cynical marketing gimmick.
This quote from a Reddit thread really gets to the heart of it for a lot of critics. It's personal. For many, the messenger completely poisoned the message. They just couldn't get past who the author seemed to be, so the advice didn't matter.
And I just love this analogy also from Reddit. It perfectly captures that other big critique, that the book takes one single, pretty simple idea, choose what you care about, and just stretches it out paper thin over 200 pages just to sell a book.
And this right here, this is probably the heart of the most serious criticism. While Manson is telling people to choose your pain, his critics just fire back, saying that is the ultimate statement of privilege. For people who are struggling with things like systemic poverty or discrimination or a chronic illness, struggle isn't a choice. The advice, as one person put it, feels like telling someone who can't afford bread to just go ahead and eat cake. So, what are we supposed to make of all this? We have two totally opposite takes. Is the book a revolutionary guide to a better life, or is it just privileged, repackaged nonsense? Well, the truth, like it often is, might be somewhere in the middle.
This comment gets at a really interesting, nuanced point. Maybe the book's real value is all about timing. For someone who's new to this kind of self-reflection, it could be a really important first step. What seems profound when you're 20 might seem kinda obvious when you're 30. The book isn't the final destination. For a lot of people, it was just a stepping stone.
So, where does that stepping stone often lead? Well, for a lot of readers, it leads straight to ancient philosophy. I mean, the parallels between Manson's core message and the basic ideas of Stoicism are just impossible to miss. Both are about focusing on what's inside you, accepting what you can't change, and choosing how you respond to the world.
And this is the key to the whole middle ground argument. A lot of the book's defenders will freely admit, yeah, it's basically Stoicism light, but they argue that's its greatest strength. They say they never would have picked up a dense, old book like Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Manson, with his edgy title and modern language, made these ancient ideas feel accessible. He was a gateway.
And this quote just synthesizes that middle ground perfectly. The messenger might be flawed. The delivery might be a little clumsy. The ideas might not even be original. But for a whole lot of people, it was the right message at exactly the right time in their lives. And that's what made it feel so transformative.
So, I guess that leaves us with a big question, doesn't it? With millions of fans on one side and millions of critics on the other, this book really forces us to ask, in the end, does it really matter where the advice comes from or who's saying it if it genuinely helps someone navigate their life just a little bit better? That's definitely something to think about.